All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, when I think back upon the past Trump era, now that we're in another one, I pinpoint a few things that really seismically changed for American politics. His very first debate, his win in New Hampshire, and one that many would also point to, but for a very different reason than me. It was the day after Access Hollywood. The entire media was covering it incessantly. The traditional rules were compelling dozens of high-profile Republicans to say he shouldn't drop out of the race and that he had no shot. All the while, the media was surrounding his residence waiting for his first public comments. And then something very interesting happened. He didn't do an interview, he holed up in his residence, and he simply released a video addressing the incident on Twitter. The next time he spoke about it publicly, it was at the second presidential debate with Hillary Clinton, where he brought with him as guests women who had publicly accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault. From that day forward, it was just a different story, and he survived. To this day, I think it's about one of the most significant days in American politics because it occurred without any input whatsoever from the news media. Previously, the news media were the conveners of power, necessary methods of communication to millions of people. Politicians and other people in power had to engage with them in order to get the message out there. But the day that the internet was invented, that value proposition was threatened. And it was really dethroned on that day in 2016 because Trump did not need them to put out his video. He shot it himself and he just tweeted it out. The news media played it over and over and over again without even speaking to him once. A decade before, that could not have possibly happened. Politicians literally did not have the capability to just easily record a video like that. Even if they did, they would need the media to air it on traditional TV because that's where a lot of people got their information. But the internet changed everything in the interim years, and it opened up all sorts of crazy possibilities. The irony is that once Trump actually did win, though, he had a symbiotic relationship with the traditional media he hated. He himself loved talking to the mainstream media. He would call them incessantly on background or off the record. Trust me, I saw it firsthand as a White House correspondent. The people who worked for him talked a massive game about how the mainstream media sucked. Off the record, though, and on background, just like their boss, there's nothing those people loved more than speaking to the New York Times or the Washington Post, leaking this tidbit or that and trying to preserve their image in official Washington. But now that Trump is out, or at least temporarily, the forces he unleashed on that day and the power of the internet's legacy is being felt all across the country. The media is not happy about it at all. Things started about a week ago. There was a Washington Post profile of Ron DeSantis' press secretary, Christina Pushaw. She is famous for brawling on Twitter with any reporter who is writing unfavorably about DeSantis. She is known for publicly posting their email inquiries to show their bias or to fact-check them post-publication in real time. Pushaw and her tactics aside, which I do think are very effective, it ignited a discussion amongst the mainstream media because they realized here you had the press secretary for possibly the second most prominent Republican in the United States who did not want to engage with the national press and in fact has found political success by being as antagonistic as possible towards them. Of course, the media spins it as Republicans don't want to answer any hard questions, which, look, let's be honest, that is definitely kind of true. But it also says less about Republicans than it does about the media. Here's a truth that we all know. The political media of the United States is by and large an arm of the capital D Democratic Party. Look at Crystal's monologue from yesterday if you need proof. Combine this with the internet and you have a new world. Republicans have no actual incentive or reason to speak with the mainstream media, who are effectively their political opponents, when they can. They could just talk to the right-wing media, who won't really ask them anything tough. In the age of the internet, the medium is the message. If Trump makes a crazy comment to a right-wing blogger and doesn't speak to the New York Times, if the comment is crazy enough, the New York Times will just cover that comment and cite the interview. He doesn't actually need to speak to them to get the coverage that he needs. DeSantis is in the same boat. He has no incentive to speak to the New York Times. He can literally just give a speech or release a video, and the Times will be forced to cover it. If he wants to elaborate, he's far better off speaking to a friendly news outlet. The Times or the Post or any other major paper is then forced to cover that if they're writing a story about it. The counter to what I'm saying would be, yeah, but then you don't get your side of the story. And while that's kind of true, does it really matter today? As Washington Post reporter Dave Weigel recently reflected on to NPR, he increasingly has found himself barred from events or with GOP officials straight up ignoring him. He notes, quote, "I've started to see more Republican candidates avoiding the press, blocking the press from events, and taking advantage of the fact that there is a conservative media that will ask different questions and has a different audience." He continues, "And to be honest, an interview with one of those websites might get more views from the people who vote in a Republican primary than an interview with me." He continues, quote, "So I'm obviously not going to say to the world, stop talking to the media. But he adds, I'm just saying objectively, there is a media infrastructure built up so you don't need to, if you're a Republican candidate, to talk to us. He's right. As he knows, if he needs to cover them, he could just listen to their interviews on a different source. All of this is an outgrowth of the internet. And of course, NPR is trying to spin this as some tragedy that nobody will talk to them anymore. How it shows that Republicans are afraid of democracy and accountability, activists. But the real pros like Weigel really understand the game. Jonathan Swan, who I also deeply respect, similarly noted on Twitter that convening power for a TV interview, that's just dead. Nobody has the power to compel a politician to do a challenging interview. Continuing what he has tried desperately to get a one-on interview with Biden, and that Biden simply won't do it because he doesn't want to be challenged. He says, quote, "There's no convening power on planet Earth that could compel him to do an interview that his advisors deem to be unsafe." Yeah, and that is why Biden does interviews with people like Jimmy Fallon. I mean, why shouldn't he? The entire press will watch it. If there's a good clip, cable news will show it. The internet has decentralized and exposed the press for what they are, mostly agents for that select faction of the Democratic Party. Personally, I have actually no problem with that. What I have a real problem with is their virtual monopoly up until now on the exchange of information and of the power that they yielded over politicians and our politics. And while that, yes, it remains the case today in American politics, those at the very, very top, like Biden and DeSantis, are realizing they don't need them as much as they used to. And while I think there will be many costs to this, mainly that startup media organizations, just like ours, lack the billions of dollars that traditional media does to subsidize investigative reporting and more, I have far more trust in the emerging model and vision because many of the hardest parts now not only exist, but have higher viewership than traditional media. It's both a better customer experience and liable to reach more people if you post something on YouTube than if you air it live on cable news. Inevitably, the former will win. It is just a matter of time to figure out how to replicate the only good things the legacy media ever did. In the meantime, you can be sure of this. While the mainstream press retains whatever waning power it does, they will not go willingly into the good night. They will fight and they will kick and scream and demean and besmirch and seek to destroy anyone who reveals their true agenda and the trendsetters that show us how powerless that they are. And it is going to be fun to watch it all play out. So I tried to take more of a meta stance on this, Crystal.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.